Hi everyone, this is New Sensei. Many of us who are just joining in and seeing Olympic archery for the first time may be alarmed to see how much stuff goes on in Olympic recurve. And you might think, oh, that looks ugly, or it's unnecessary or excessive. And if you don't like this sort of thing, then I'm not here to change your mind. However, it is easy to become prejudiced against things that we don't understand. The goal of this video is to explain what goes on the Olympic bow and why it's used. And you may be surprised to see that there isn't actually that much difference between this bow and what you might be used to. Those of us who know a bit about archery and history will know that a bow is basically a stick and a string. So it's something like this. This is an unstrung longbow, and it is literally a stick. Now, this particular bow is not a historical bow, but you might recognize the shape as something which is more or less very similar to what would have been used throughout history. And there's nothing wrong with this bow. Many people enjoy this sort of thing, and it can be handmade at home. So there is a very big appeal to this. So while this bow can be shot perfectly fine, it's not the most appealing thing, especially if you're a modern shooter and you're picking up archery. This is not the easiest thing to use. Bows like this were used at the early modern Olympic Games. It's only during the 50s and 60s and 70s that we see a shift in design thanks to materials, manufacturing and machining. For a modern day archer, a traditional bow will look something like this. This is the Fredbear takedown recurve, a revolutionary design for its time. While it does have some modern features like the ability to take the bow apart thanks to its lock-in limb system, it is an all-wood bow. And for traditional shooters, this is perhaps the upper limit to what you consider to be real archery. Bows like this were the epitome of traditional design, and many a field shooter or hunter will be very familiar with this kind of bow. It is basically a fancy stick and string. As time goes on, so do the advances. We see bows and arrows transform from wood to aluminium and then to carbon. What we have here is the Win Inno CXT, a top-line modern target competitive bow. While it might look very fancy, functionally it's the same as what we saw before. In this configuration, it is a bare bow. It is just the bow and the string, and really that's all there is to it. It is the same way you use a traditional bow. Again, traditional bow, modern bow. Modern bare bow is still a classification that is used in competition today, mostly in disciplines like 3D archery, indoor archery and field archery. Meanwhile, the open freestyle division does make use of all the accessories you see at the Olympic Games. In actuality, there aren't that many additions to the bow, and the bow fundamentally doesn't change that much. We'll go through each add-on and we'll explain what each one does. The first addition, and perhaps the most important, is the sight. As with any weapon system or platform, the sight provides a static reference point. Most sights used are actually plain iron sights, though some archers will exchange it for an aftermarket design. All sights used in the Olympic Games are non-magnified. While some might consider using a sight to be cheating, in fairness, most things today that involve aiming will include some kind of sight. There is still a very strong push and a large community that chooses not to use sights. Hence we have the bare bow community, but even then there are different methods to sight using the arrow. The problem with bare bow methods is that they have a lot of variation. It is nearly impossible for an archer to retain the exact same sight picture and execute the same shot without a sight. There is a lot of fun and satisfaction in doing so, but the reality is that you are more or less spraying the target within a reasonable grouping for your skill level. The sight removes much of that guesswork. While the archer still has to find the right sight setting and make the necessary adjustments, it doesn't make the shot easier. Remember, the archer still has to bring the bow on target and execute the shot normally. The next component is actually the most obvious one because you see it first, the stabilizer rods. Many beginners start with 1, but Olympians tend to use 3 plus an extender. The purpose of these rods is to add weight to the bow. Why would you do that? A light bow is actually quite hard to hold steady. While lightweight is a good characteristic for practical purposes, for accuracy and target shooting, being too light means that there is a lot more movement with a lot less effort, and that can mean your accuracy is thrown out the window thanks to a muscle twitch or a slight hesitation. Adding weight to the bow makes it more stable. Now, barebow shooters will make use of small weights, but Olympic style shooters can go the extra step. The stabilizer rods basically add stabilization. Many of you will recognize this concept as 3-axis stabilization. It helps the archer maintain the bow's balance in 3 directions. And for those who use rifles or even cameras, you will greatly appreciate what a big difference stabilization makes. Again, it doesn't help make the shot easier. I still have to bring the bow on target, pull it back, and execute the shot. Except now it's a whole lot heavier. The last addition is the smallest, but it's actually the most important for an Olympic shooter. It's the clicker. Many people ask about what this tiny rod in front of the arrow does. Now, often it's a rod like this, but more often it's a strip of aluminium or carbon like this, and it goes just in front of the arrow in this position. If you see these slow motion replays of Olympic archers, you'll see this move and the arrow gets released. What does it do? One of the big difficulties that an archer has is consistent draw length. The way you pull the string back and where you stop must be exactly the same. Any difference here will result in a very large difference in velocity and therefore shot placement. For a traditional shooter with no shooting aids, they have to do it by feel. A modern archer uses the clicker to tell them when they're at the right point. They pull the arrow through the clicker, it goes off, and they automatically let go. It is still an action they must take, but this is something which removes a very large variable. Arguably, you might say this is kind of cheating, and perhaps to some people it's more of a shortcut than using a sight. Nonetheless, it is a skill that must be mastered by both the barebow shooters and the Olympic archers. Clicker control is actually much harder than it looks, and while yes, we do have a way to tell us when to let go, getting it through the clicker is a whole different challenge. And again, the point that I really want to reinforce is while all these extra aids will make it easier for the archer to do certain things, whether it's sighting on target or keeping the bow steady or controlling the shot placement, the shot is still 100% the archer. The bow does not shoot itself. What changes instead is the expectations and the standards. A barebow shooter will not expect to shoot perfectly every single time. There will be inherent variations which they can't really control. So if you're shooting a round of say 720 points, a barebow shooter that gets 500 points is doing a very, very good job. And most of the legendary barebow shooters will probably get around this range or slightly higher. However, an Olympic freestyle shooter who gets a 500 out of 720 is having an extremely bad day. That standard is nowhere near good enough. They expect to get 600 and above for their minimum qualifying score. So again, the shooting expectations are different. The quality of the shot must be maintained regardless of whether you shoot a barebow or an Olympic bow. So in the end, an Olympic shooter is fundamentally doing the same thing as a barebow shooter or a traditional shooter or whatever style you might recognize. Archery at its basis is using a bow to hit a target. While the accessories may make certain things easier, it still comes down to the user. This is New Sensei. Hope you found this interesting. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.